September 16th, 1935. Harlem. The Cotton Club was glowing with music, smoke, and power. And that was the night Dutch Schultz made a mistake he could never undo. He tried to humiliate Bumpy Johnson in front of everyone. What happened after that would quietly change the balance of power in New York forever. Stay with me, because this is not a movie. This is real history. And the revenge did not come with shouting or chaos. It came with patience. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was not loud. He did not need to be. He had grown up in Harlem when the streets were hard and respect was everything. By the 1930s, Harlem was alive with jazz, money, and underground business. The Cotton Club was one of the most famous nightclubs in America. Big performers played there. Wealthy white customers filled the tables. But even though it sat in Harlem, most black residents could not even sit in the audience. At that time, Dutch Schultz was a powerful crime boss. He controlled numbers operations and other rackets in parts of New York. He was ambitious, reckless, and hungry for more territory. And Harlem, with its growing underground economy, looked like an opportunity. But Harlem was not empty land. It had its own leaders. One of them was Stephanie St. Clair, known as Madam Queen, who ran a successful numbers business. And working closely with her was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy handled enforcement and protection. He was calm, intelligent, and strategic. He believed Harlem's money should stay in Harlem. When Dutch Schultz decided he wanted Harlem's numbers racket, he did not ask. He moved in. His men pressured local operators. They used fear to take over betting spots, and the tension built slowly. Everyone in Harlem could feel it. Then came that night at the Cotton Club. Stories from that time say Schultz wanted to show dominance. In a public setting, surrounded by people, he confronted Bumpy. The message was simple. Harlem now belonged to him. It was not just business. It was disrespectful. In that world, disrespect was dangerous. But Bumpy did not explode. He did not raise his voice. He looked at Schultz and stayed calm. That calmness confused people, because sometimes the quiet man is the most dangerous in the room. Here is where you need to pay attention. Revenge in that era was not always immediate. It was planned. It was calculated. And it was often indirect. After that public humiliation, Bumpy aligned himself more closely with powerful figures in the Italian Mafia who were not happy with Dutch Schultz either. One of those figures was Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano was building a new kind of organized structure in New York. He wanted order, not chaos. Schultz, with his loud behavior and his plan to attack a federal prosecutor, was becoming a problem for everyone. Dutch Schultz had another issue. He wanted to eliminate prosecutor Thomas Dewey, who was building cases against major crime bosses. Schultz believed removing Dewey would solve his legal troubles. But the higher bosses disagreed. They feared it would bring too much heat from the government. So a meeting was held by what became known as the Commission, the governing body of organized crime families. Schultz argued for his plan. The others saw him as reckless, and in that meeting, a decision was made. Dutch Schultz would be removed. Think about that. The man who tried to dominate Harlem had now become a liability to his own allies. On October 23, 1935, just weeks after that tension in Harlem, Dutch Schultz was shot at the Palace Chop House in Newark, New Jersey. He did not die instantly. He lingered for nearly a day, drifting in and out of consciousness, mumbling strange phrases that reporters later called his final words. Now let's be clear. There is no official record that says Bumpy Johnson pulled a trigger. History is more complex than simple revenge scenes. But what is clear is this. After Schultz was gone, Bumpy Johnson and his allies gained stronger control over Harlem's numbers operation under agreements with the Italian Mafia families. In the end, Schultz's attempt to bully Harlem backfired. The public humiliation at the Cotton Club did not break Bumpy Johnson. It strengthened his position, because instead of reacting with emotion, he reacted with alliances. And this is the lesson most people miss. Power is not always loud. Sometimes, power is patience. Bumpy understood timing. He understood that if your opponent is already making mistakes, you do not interrupt them. You let them continue. After Schultz's death, the structure of organized crime in New York changed. Luciano's system became stronger. Harlem's operations continued under negotiated agreements. And Bumpy Johnson became one of the most respected figures in Harlem's underground economy for decades. But here is something deeper. The 1930s were a time when black communities faced heavy discrimination. The economic opportunities were limited. In that environment, the numbers racket became a source of income for many families in Harlem. It was illegal, yes, but it was also woven into the community's survival. That is why control over it mattered so much. Bumpy Johnson was not just fighting for money. In his view, he was defending local control against outside takeover. That does not make the business clean, but it explains the loyalty he earned. When Dutch Schultz tried to step into Harlem and treat its leaders like they did not matter, he underestimated something important. He underestimated unity. And that is why this story still matters today. Sometimes the loudest person in the room looks powerful, but the person building quiet alliances is often stronger. Schultz relied on fear. Bumpy relied on relationships. Now imagine being in that Cotton Club that night. The music is playing, the glasses are clinking, the tension thickens in the air. One man is trying to prove dominance, another man absorbing the insult without flinching. If you were there, who would you have thought would win? Most people would have chosen the louder man. History chose the patient one. And here is the part I want you to remember long after this video ends. Revenge does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like a strategy. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Dutch Schultz tried to control everything with force. In the end, his own aggression isolated him. Bumpy Johnson, by contrast, survived Harlem's dangerous landscape for decades. He built influence not by shouting, but by calculating. When you study real history, you realize something powerful. When the streets of Harlem in 1935 were not just about crime. They were about power, race, money, and survival in a divided America. And the day Dutch Schultz disrespected Bumpy Johnson was not the day revenge happened. It was the day the countdown quietly began. If you found this story powerful, stay with this channel, because there are many more real stories where pride, strategy, and timing changed history in ways most people never notice. Next time, we will break down how the power structure of New York crime families was rebuilt after 1935, and how figures like Lucky Luciano reshaped the underworld forever. History is not just dates. It is decisions. And sometimes, one decision in a nightclub can echo for generations.